Are you about ready, Pedro?
I'd say we're ready to get started. It looks like we've got a good amount of people that are here. We can at least hear you for right now, so we'll try to work together to make sure that we can hear Justin when he's back. So
I think Justin did it on purpose, so he's going to get out of butchering duck.
Oh, yeah, exactly.
No, he's actually very, very excited to share this recipe. So let me welcome everyone today. Thank you for joining us again for another cooking demo. And Justin and I thought it would be really fun to do one together. And of course, it's very different than when we cooked together in the past because we're trying to be cautious of each other's space. And normally we're right, in there right next to each other. So it's going to be a little bit of back and forth today. But this recipe that we wanted to share with you today is a recipe that we very much collaborated on. And that's why we wanted to share it together. This is a recipe out of our cookbook, out of Seasons Cookbook. It's a very summery dish, and it's getting to be summer here. We're right at the beginning. So things like tomatoes we're starting to see tomatoes, lots of great berries. And so this is a really, really great summer dish. And what I love about this dish is that one, you get to eat duck, which I think a lot of people they don't cook duck at home. They save it for like a special occasion when they're at a restaurant. And duck is actually quite simple to make. It's a very fast, you can cook a duck breast in a pan in 10 minutes or less. And so it's a really quick thing to cook. And once you get comfortable cooking it and getting that temperature right, you'll see how easy it is. So we thought it would be great to show you how to break down a whole duck. And then what else is with this dish is a charred eggplant puree. So charred, C-H-A-R-R-E-D, not like Swiss chard, but charred like on the grill charred, eggplant puree. And then a really great tomato, herb salad and pickled blackberries. So what's cool with this dish is that you could do this dish on the grill. So if you had your grill on and you wanted to do it all outside, you could do it all on the grill. You could even put your cast iron pan on the grill to cook your duck breast. Today, we decided to show you what it would be like to do inside because not everyone wants to turn their grill on all the time. And so in the recipe, you can put the eggplant directly on the grill, or I'm going to show you how you can cook it just on your burner, assuming you have a gas stove at home. So what we're going to start first is the eggplant puree because it takes the longest. So what I have here, and I want to make sure everybody has wine in their glass. That's a really important part here too. So like I said, we're drinking the Cloud Landing Pinot Noir and, really just delicious, really food-friendly Pinot, one of our newer wines, like Pedro said, one of our newer vineyards. And it's going to be great with this dish. This dish is, like I said, it's got that a little bit gamey from the duck and then this charred flavor from the eggplant, which is a little bit smoky. And then you get this brightness and acidity from the blackberries. So we're kind of hitting every mark with this dish pairing with the wine. So let's talk eggplant. I say this all the time, and those of you that have been on know this by now, but you can see it because I do a lot of this, that I'm Italian, talk with my hands a lot, but eggplant is one of my absolute favorite vegetables. I get very excited in the summertime for eggplant. So with this dish, you're going to want to choose a medium-sized eggplant. You don't want them to be too small, not like a Japanese eggplant, which are the longer, skinnier ones. You actually want it to be one of the fatter eggplant, because what we're going to do is literally just put this on the burner. I didn't even cut the stem off. The whole thing, you're not going to oil it. You're not going to salt it. You're just going to put it directly on the burner. And the reason that you want this size is because we're going to char the outside. Like you want the outside skin to become black and crispy. That's flavor. If you have a smaller eggplant, what'll happen is you'll have too much of that charred flavor versus the contrast of the middle. Because what happens is that center of the eggplant gets mushy, right? We want it to get mushy because we're going to puree this, but it's got this real decadence, this creaminess. And if you don't have the balance of the inside to the outside, if there's too much of the outside and not enough the inside, then it becomes too smoky. So I'm just going to take a fork and make a couple quick puncture marks on the eggplant, and then I'm just going to throw it directly on my burner. That's it. I've got it on my burner. So that's the start of the eggplant. And then we're just going to let that, while Justin's breaking down and butchering the duck, I'm just going to leave that on there. And like I said, when you think it's done, just let it go longer. The entire outside skin of the eggplant should be black and the whole thing should be like mushy. So that being said, I'm going to pass off to Justin because he's going to do some of the work on the duck, and then we'll come back to this in a little bit. I'll be right back.
Thanks, Trace. And as you said, that is very counterintuitive to go ahead and just kind of set something on the grill like that. But with your guidance and knowing that that's okay to do, and it's kind of funny to see that sitting there kind of burning away. We're getting Justin kind of online and prepped into coming into this. I did see that someone else is enjoying the Los Robles Pinot Noir. That would be a really great pairing wine with this, as well. Syrah is another wine with duck that goes hand in hand. All right, I'm going to turn it back over to Justin, and now I'd like to pass the mic to Justin.
Hey there, can you hear me now?
Very well, thank you, Justin.
So real quick, Tracey just charred the eggplant, and now she's charring an onion over here. I don't know if y'all can see that, but she's basically burning the onion on the burner. All right, so I'm going to start breaking this down, and if there's anything you want to add in as I do it, any tips or anything that I don't know, that'd be great. So we're going to make some duck confit with the legs, and then we're going to take the breasts off, and we're going to show you how to sear a breast. And this is a recipe out of the seasoned cookbook, but I usually start by kind of taking off the skin around the neck, and all this skin you can use to make the duck fat to confit the duck. And we actually have duck on the menu right now. I don't know. Katie, did you already put all the ducks up? Yeah. Oh, okay. We got a really beautiful duck on the menu right now. We're doing the breast, and we rub it with umeboshi, which is a Japanese preserved apricot. And then we put a spice rub on and roast it in the oven. So there's different ways you can cook duck. I think the best way I've had it, I had some really well-cooked duck when I was in France one time, and it was cooked over a charcoal grill, and I really enjoyed it. But my favorite is when the duck man and Jennifer aged the duck for us. So they do a dry aged duck for about 30 days, like you would dry age a steak, and it dries it out. And then we roast it in the pizza oven in the garden. We do this for the farm to table dinner. And when they dry it out, there's a little bit less moisture in it, so the skin gets really crispy. It almost gets this flavor like foie gras.
Justin, just real quick while you're doing this, you're talking about preparing. Do you do any kind of buttermilk soaking, or is there anything? We've had a couple of comments about gamey flavor. People are a little worried about duck and gamey. And I know with the Liberty Farms, we're dealing with a very superior duck, but this is something that not everyone's able to get all the time. Can you either of you speak to that a tiny bit, please?
Yeah, so what they're talking about, this is a farm-raised duck, so it doesn't have that gamey flavor. But you know, you could definitely soak it in buttermilk, or, you know, you could pair stronger flavors with it. But the nice thing about this one, this farm-raised duck, it's a really clean flavor, especially the fat. Like the fat's really, really mild and kind of takes on whatever flavor you put with it. But wild duck, yeah, totally different thing. Probably want to do something that tenderizes and kind of covers up that gamey flavor. So I'll start butchering it here. And then if anybody at home that has a duck and they have a question along the way and we need to look at it, Jessica, one of our marketing members at Jackson Family Wines, can probably put you on the screen so we can see what you're doing. So text Pedro and Jessica if we need to look at your duck. But basically, it's pretty similar to a chicken. Definitely the bones are a little firmer. But as far as butchering, it's pretty similar. So usually what I do is after I take that neck fat off, I come around and I'm just going to go over the wishbone. So the wishbone is basically like that. I'm going to take my knife and run across it, and then underneath it, and just pull that out. And that's going to make it a little bit easier to take the breasts off. So I just took that out. I made a wish. Hopefully it comes true. And now I'm going to go right. I'm going to feel the backbone. I'm going to go right down the backbone. And then I can see the rib cage, I guess it is maybe. And I'm just going to come down along the side, just working my knife. Can y'all see that, hopefully? So let me hold that up there. So just working down to get the breast off. And we go over the arm there, and then come down, and then over here, just above the back leg. And then that's the breast. So, you know, it's got a good amount of fat on it, and I think some people are afraid of that fat, but I think it's delicious. And, you know, you can, if you don't like too much of the fat, you can render it off. So you can pull a little bit of this off. You want to save everything. Everything on this duck is definitely usable. So we always make stock with the bones. we make the fat with all the skin. We render that out, and you can cook potatoes in it, you can cook vegetables in it, you can confit the duck in it. This tender here, I like to take this little bit of sinew out. I like to leave the tender on when I cook it. I call it the Scooby snack or chef snack. And after I cook the breast and flip it, that's what I usually get to eat right there.
So Justin,
yep.
Real quick question. Would you spatchcock a duck like this? It looks like it's kind of almost splayed and kind of ready for that. And please describe sinew a little bit for people. A lot of people might not have ever broken down an animal and had to deal with what that is.
Yeah, it's just the part that is along the bone, and it's kind of tough. So you just kind of want to cut that out. So you can see this. Hopefully you can see that right there. That's just one little piece I'm going to take out. And again, we wouldn't get rid of that. We would save that for a sauce. And then you can either do two things at this point, because you kind of want a little bit of the fat to render out. So you can either take your knife and poke it. That's what we do sometimes if we don't want the lines on it. But the other way is you can score it. So you just take your knife and run it across. The main thing here when you're scoring the duck is you don't want to go into the skin. You want to just go right through the fat, but not into the skin. So use the knife, and you probably don't want an insanely sharp knife. It's actually better if it's a little bit not too crazy sharp. And you use the weight of the knife. I'm not pressing down. I'm just dragging it across basically. Because what will happen is if you don't, when you go through into that meat, then when it cooks, it'll bleed out a little bit. So then I'm just going to go back the other direction. And then I'm going to set a pan on here. I got a nice cast iron pan. And I'm going to season it with just a little bit of salt. Tracey's got her onions charred back here. She's just pulling them off the burner. I'm going to add just a teeny bit of fat to the pan. And when you cook it, super simple. You just cook it skin side down for about, 8 to 10 minutes, depending on your heat. And as it's cooking, you just pour some of the fat off there. So I'm going to step away, and Trace is going to step back in and show you the next step for the eggplant puree. Actually, you know what? I'm going to show you how to take the leg off real quick, and then we'll talk about confit and when I'm done with that. So now I'm going to come to the backbone here, and I'm going to go down, and you can kind of just pop it back and feel where it is. Go underneath that bone from the back leg. Again, if you've ever butchered a chicken, pretty much the same thing. Slice it off, nice amount of fat. And this, when I come back, I will salt it. I got my pan over here. I don't know if you can hear that, but it's starting to sizzle a little bit. So I'm just going to turn the heat to low and let that render out. And I will hop back in after Tracey does her eggplant.
Question for you, Justin.
What's that?
Question for you. Do you start the duck breast on a cold pan or a hot pan?
I started on just a warm pan. If you start it on too hot, sometimes it gets color and sears before it starts to render. So just barely warm. That was a cold pan until I put it on. Yeah, you definitely don't want to throw it into a hot pan like you would sear a piece of fish or anything like that. You definitely want it, when you're trying to render out the fat, you want it low and slow. So I'm going to pass it off to Trace, and then she's going to hop back in here.
That was a great question, and thank you for asking that about how to cook the duck breast, because I myself would have put it on a pan that was already very hot and probably gone at it that direction. And thinking about how you want to draw that fat off really slow is a really big thing. Hey, Trace, we had a great question. If someone doesn't have an open flame or maybe an electric stove, they don't have a gas grill, how could you get some char onto the veggies?
So let me tell you guys I want to show you my eggplant. Right? Remember how I was saying you want this see how, let me show you this side. It's a good one. It is charred. So I know, Pedro, there was a question about if you don't have an open flame. I mean, then if you don't have an open flame, what I would suggest doing is going in like the broiler of your oven. So that way you get the same effect, right? But you'd have to watch it very closely. But that way you can have, you know, your eggplant, that skin to be really crispy. I put my onion on there so you could see the edges of my onion are all, you know, same thing, kind of black and charred. So I'm going to go in the blender with this. So in my blender right now, I have my roasted garlic oil, my my reduced red wine. I'm going to go ahead and put my onion in there. And then it's so easy, right? You've got your eggplant. I still have the skin on, or the root on the top, and you can just kind of pull it right off. That's how soft that should be. It should be practically, it didn't take much effort at all for that to fall right off. And that's what you want. You want the eggplant to be really, really soft. And then I've got my tahini. And I'm gonna go ahead and add a little bit of salt here and just a little bit more oil. So I'm gonna set this aside. I'm gonna puree this in a moment, but quick before I puree that, and then Justin can jump back in and show you all the duck confit. So pickled blackberries. This is a recipe you can do ahead of time. You can do a day or two ahead of time, or you can do them, you know, a few minutes before, like we're about to do. If you do them a day or two ahead of time, they'll definitely take on more of the flavor, but either way, they're really delicious. So I'm going to put in a small pot here. I've got some white balsamic vinegar, some white verjus. And I know those of you that have been watching us every week, we probably have used verjus every single week. And this is just an ingredient we love in the kitchen. We make a white and a red version. But for those of you that don't know verjus, think of it like a really mild vinegar. So it's made from the last press of the grapes. And so oftentimes when, you know, we're very diligent about the grapes that we use in our wine. And so our winemakers will go and filter through those grapes while they're hanging from the vine, and they'll clip off the ones that are not good enough to use for wine. That's how kind of strict we are with the grapes that we want to put in our wine. But then we have these grapes that are maybe a little bit bruised or damaged. And so what we do is we make verjus with them. And so we get this really, really like fresh, bright grape juice. Like I said, it's really high in acid. So it's similar to vinegar, not quite as potent. So it's great in a recipe like this. That's why I use part verjus, part vinegar. And then I've got some sugar. Oh, let me do this. My sugar. And then my secret ingredient in this is fish sauce, right? Just a little splash of fish sauce. And what the fish sauce does is fish sauce is kind of salty, but it's also like, it's kind of unctuous. It's got this real like satisfying umami thing going on. So it's this really cool flavor. It's one of those things that when you make this for people, they're going to be like, oh, there's something really familiar here, but they don't know what. So it's kind of fun. And then I'm just going to bring this up to a quick boil, just up to a boil. I'm not even really going to let it, just as it starts to bubble. And then I'm going to pour it over my blackberries. So Justin, I'm going to call you back in. So while Justin's showing you the guys, the duck legs and the confit, I'm just going to puree that eggplant puree. And then when it's through, we'll show you the finished product at the end, what it's supposed to look like.
Hey, Trace, quick question.
Yeah, of course.
Substitute for verjus, what would you recommend? Or something like it?
Yeah, so if you want to substitute for verjus, use a milder vinegar. So in this recipe, it calls for white balsamic, which is actually a bit of a milder vinegar as well. You could cut that with maybe instead of the verjus, you would do half vinegar, half water. Or you could even do like really fresh grape juice, like a white grape juice. Even like fresh apple juice could. It's a little bit sweeter, but that could work too. But you want something that's pretty high in acid.
Okay, but not like lemon juice kind of a thing.
No, lemon juice too acidic. So really, that's how I just want to show you. Like you don't even really need to see that liquid came just up to a quick boil, and I'm just gonna go ahead and throw my blackberries in and set them off to the side, off the heat. I don't want them on the heat, so I want to set those off to the side. So Justin's gonna come back in and talk to you all about the duck legs and duck confit, and then we'll show you how to throw that salad together and the finished product. So stay tuned.
All right, so
verjus
we
in
got
the fridge.
duck.
Verjus in the fridge.
Can last until it gets moldy. So a really long time because it has a good amount of acid, so it's going to stay good. I'm going to show you this duck right now. It's probably been, 6 minutes or so. You can see it's starting to get golden brown. So one thing if you want to do, if you have it in a small pan, is you want to get rid of some of the fat as it comes off. So you want to save the fat, but you don't want it in there because it's going to start to come up and overcook the duck. So you just pour the fat out, put it back on the skin, put it back on low heat, and continue to let that render out. So now we're going to talk about confit. And confit was a way to preserve duck before they had refrigeration. So they would, when they had a lot of duck, they would salt it back in the day and then cook it in its own fat and then leave the fat over it so no oxygen can get in there. And then you could preserve it for a really long time. So I think you could keep it probably for years in the refrigerator if you had to. But people still do it because it has really great flavor and texture. So the leg, I don't know what is there. There's a saying about a duck. They look chill on the top, but you can't see their feet moving on the bottom. Their feet get a lot of action, so the meat can be a little bit tougher. So that's another reason why we confit it. And one thing we did, I forgot how it started, but Tracey and I were talking about if duck confit got better with age. And we did a test with Jim, and we did duck confit at different ages, and he came up here and tasted it. But I think it does get better with age. So it's one of those things, like if you can sit on it for a couple months in the fridge, the flavor gets a little more complex. So basically here we have salt, sugar, thyme, fennel, black peppercorns, juniper, bay leaf, and we're just going to toss that over the duck. And it takes a good amount of salt. And then you just let it pull all the moisture out overnight. So you just pack it in the salt. You can either, at this point, put it in a perforated pan and let it set and drip, or you can just kind of wrap it. And then you put it in the duck fat and let it cook really, really slowly. And then you store it in that duck fat, and that is what keeps the oxygen out and keeps the duck really, really fresh and I wouldn't say fresh, lets it age without oxygen and develop these really amazing, complex flavors. So, Jen, you got anything on duck confit? Your dad was telling me he had a new way to render the fat from the duck. He said he was doing it in a crock pot overnight, which I thought was pretty cool.
Yeah, he's just turning it on low and just letting it melt. When I try to render fat down at home, I actually put it in a blender with some water in the blender so that it doesn't get wrapped up around the motor. But essentially just try to break down all those, either if you're buying the raw fat from us or if you're breaking down your own duck at home, you don't want to throw in like the full neck skin and hope that that's going to render all in one piece. So it's nice to get it chopped up as much as you can. And so with the water in the blender, it keeps it moving in the blender, but then on the stove, low and slow, all that water evaporates and you're just left with this like beautiful golden fat at the end. We actually started selling a DIY confit kit on our website that comes with 6 duck legs and 2.5 pounds of raw fat to render. So you can kind of just do your own recipe. We actually have decided not to send recipes with it because everyone's got a different method or a different way. It's kind of like every French mother had their own way to do confit. So we didn't want to lead anyone in any direction, but now the people at home, they can follow your direction, Justin.
A quick question, Justin. In the steps that you're talking about here, the duck that's in the silver bowl in front of you, after you're done with that, and before you set it into the fat that you're going to have there, would you rinse the salt and the seasonings off of that before putting it in the fat?
Yeah, you would. So what I would do is I would let this sit overnight, and then usually when we're doing it, we do a whole lot of it. You can see this. We got a pan right here. This is probably like I don't know, 32 duck legs in there. And so we would put it in a perforated pan. At home, I would probably just wrap it up in a Ziploc bag and with the salt. But yeah, the next day you want to give it a little quick rinse and then cover it with fat and cook it in a low oven, probably at around 275 degrees. So you can see it's covered in the herbs and salt. And basically we took a whole bunch of legs, did that, and then popped them in here and cooked it in the oven. And then we've been storing them in here for 6/13 was the date we did these ones. But you can see it's just coated in fat. And so at this point, you could do different things with it. You know, you can see how much it's shrunk down in size. So because a lot of that moisture is gone, it's cooked out. So if you wanted to do it really crispy, you could drop that whole thing into a fryer, which is really good. It gets crispy on the outside and soft on the inside. You can shred it. You can sear it in a pan and roast it. I'll just throw that one in there for fun. I'm going to show you that breast is cooking really nice. It's getting nice and crispy over here. I'm going to put that back in for a minute. But there's a lot of fat in here, and it takes a good amount of fat. And whenever you pull it out, one important thing is you want to make sure it's still covered in fat, because if it's not covered, you'll get mold in there. It's best basically to pull it out, do what you need to do with it, and then warm the fat up and then pour it back over it so there's no air getting in there, because the air, the oxygen, is what can make it mold. And on the bottom, the moisture, I don't know what you call it. Jen might help me here. We call it the gel, the duck gel. It's really salty. It's amazing. You can't really make it into a sauce because it's so salty, but you could turn it into a soup, or you can cook potatoes in it. Again, not wasting anything. Jen, you got anything on that? You know, what do you guys call it?
I kind of call it the same. It's like this gelatinous, because the ducks themselves, the bones have a lot of collagen in them. So when you cook them, whether you're making the stock or rendering it down, you end up with that kind of portion like you're talking about. So actually, in my fridge, let's see if I can find it. I pulled this off a bunch of duck legs that I cooked. And so you can actually see what Justin's talking about, this kind of like gelatinous stuff. And this is the fat. So the fat is rendered down like super clean, and we use it to cook our potatoes in and stuff. Let me see if I can pop the top off of it. So, you know, it lasts forever in the fridge. I say with the fat, when you do stuff like this, as long as you don't put a dirty instrument into the container, it won't mold. It's just like jam. Like, you don't want to put a buttery knife into a jam jar, because that's what's going to create that moldy environment. So clean instrument into it and it'll last for forever. But yeah, we're kind of waiting to get down to that bottom goodness, and we'll probably throw it into a soup, like you said.
What other kind of duck products do you have in your fridge over there?
I have a bag of duck wings that I'm ready to experiment with. So we sell 5-pound bags of the duck wing, and it's about 3 wings per pound. We sell them the 3 parts. So we cook the 2 main parts, you know, like the shoulder and the arm, and then there's a tip on all those, and I'll save the tips and make a stock out of those. But they're kind of like the legs. Like, you need to cook them low and slow to break down those muscles in there, but it is a delicious alternative to chicken wings, let me tell you.
I'm going to show you this. I got the duck breast here, nice and crispy. I just flipped it over. It's been cooking about 2 minutes. It's still nice and rare. I just threw that leg in there for fun, and I'm going to have Tracey pop back in here, and then she's going to show you her eggplant puree, and then we're going to finish the plate off. So anybody have any questions about duck for Jen or for myself?
We're looking good on questions so far, but if more pop up, we'll definitely come through. It's interesting to see that you were able to pick up that duck breast with just your hand a little while ago. So you can tell it was actually very slow and low. Obviously, you don't have gloves on right now, so you don't want to be touching it. But yeah, it's not searing off at all. It's really very, very, very low.
And now I'm going to set it over here for Trace, but I'm just going to let it rest. And anytime you're cooking a piece of meat, you definitely want it to rest before you slice it. So it's nice and rare right now. I like it a little bit between rare and medium. But it's one of those preference things. So I'm gonna throw this back on. I'm gonna give Tracey some earbuds, and then we're gonna finish this dish off, pair it with some Pinot.
There is one question I see about duck soup recipe, and I just use the duck stock as a replacement for chicken stock, beef stock. It's super flavorful, and even the stock itself can be like pretty gelatinous. Like when you shake it in the fridge, it's kind of blobby. So it's pretty strong and potent. So just kind of keep that in mind as you're using it. But we'll make duck pho, duck ramen. I'm just kind of using the broth as good chicken broth.
Okay. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
Okay, cool. Good. All right. So now we got a lot of our stuff here. So we've got our eggplant puree, and I want to show you guys how you can see that it's this, you know, it's a darker color. It's not like the inside of the eggplant where it's a cleaner color. It gets that color because of the flecks of the skin that are black. Do you want to, Justin, do you mind just holding that a little bit closer to the camera for me, please? So then you can see, and then, you know, so you can see the black specks in there. So again, that kind of creamy, smoky thing going on. And then while the duck breast is resting, we're gonna make our salad. So in the bowl here, I've got my fresh herbs. So in here, I've got some basil, some parsley, some mint, and some chives. You know, any combination. I would just be cautious of how much mint you use. That's the strongest flavor in there. So, and if the leaves are really big, I tear them in half. So, you know, this was a leaf that was kind of big. So I tore that. You can even tear that down a little bit. So you want to think about how you're eating and how strong of a flavor you want. And then tomatoes. I'm so excited that it is the beginning of tomato season. We've got these beautiful tomatoes. I want to show you one of my favorite tricks. So you can cut these in circles or you can cut them in half. So watch, I'm going to show you. So if we had to cut all these tomatoes in half, you'd probably do this. You take one tomato, you'd cut it in half, you throw it in the bowl. You take another tomato, you cut it in half, throw it in the bowl. So here's my trick. I like to use a serrated knife when I do this, and you can take as many tomatoes as it would take to go under the palm of your hand. So my hand's a little bit smaller, so I've got 7 tomatoes here, depending on the size of the tomato too. And then you put your palm down and you kind of lift your fingers up. That's how I would do it as a chef. Now I want to show you the extra safe way because I know some people are really cautious about doing this. So we have all sorts of quart containers. So you want to get 2 lids of the same size and go ahead and put your tomatoes inside that lid until they are pretty tight. You want them to not really be able to move. And then you take the same lid, but flip it upside down. So now I've got this kind of sandwich. I take my knife and I'm going to cut right across like so. So now my hand's protected, and now all my tomatoes. So I just cut 14 tomatoes in half in the same amount of time it would have taken me to cut 1 or 2. It's my chef trick of the day. Justin just asked me if I invented that move. Can you all hear me, by the way?
Yes, we can hear you just fine.
Oh, Pedro, you scared me.
Sorry, I had to unmute myself there. So yeah, we can hear you. We can hear you really well.
So this trick is a bone of contention between Justin and I because I did not know that I didn't invent this move. I'm going to be really honest. I didn't invent it. I learned this from a dishwasher years ago. I worked at a restaurant where we had a salad that had grapes in it. And so we'd spend a lot of time cutting grapes in half. And one day I'm cutting the grapes in half the same way I showed you, like one at a time. And my dishwasher walked up and he taps me on the shoulder and took my knife and went like this and cut about 12 of them at once. And my mind was blown. I thought, oh my God, how much time have I wasted cutting grapes or tomatoes or anything brown like that? So although I didn't take credit for it, I thought that I had been shown by someone else who had I'm sure they had been shown along the way. Well, I showed Justin this trick and he was like, oh my God, this is great. We made a video about it. And then not long after we found out that, who was it? Rachel Ray, who's showing it on her show. Not because she learned it from us, but she, like me, probably learned it from someone she worked with along the way. We just thought we had kind of the claim to fame on this really cool trick. I still like to claim it because I still think it's cool. And this is 15 years later since I've learned this trick. And every time I do it, it makes me really happy. And I often, most people are like, oh, you know, the same way that I was, just really impressed by this little trick. So, so in my bowl, I've got my herbs, my tomatoes. I'm going to season it with a little bit of salt. And then I've got some olive oil and sherry vinegar. So I'm creating a salad here, but you're not going to dress this as much as you would a typical salad. This is a really, really light dressing. You don't want this to get wilty. So just a really tiny bit of olive oil and a real small splash of sherry vinegar. The sherry vinegar is in there. Again, you're not creating a dressing like you would for a salad because you've got acid from your tomatoes. We're going to have acid from these pickled blackberries on the plate. So it's more just to create some balance in the salad. So I'm going to toss that lightly. And then this dish doesn't have a clear sauce, but you've got your eggplant puree, which kind of becomes your sauce, and then your pickled blackberries. Like if you cut a small piece of blackberry with each bite of the duck is when you're going to get that same flavor as you would from a sauce. So you'd like to do a nice, you know, big smear of this eggplant puree on the plate. And then a nice pile of this beautiful salad. You know, make sure you can see some of those pretty tomatoes, maybe a couple fall on the side. And then I've got my blackberries. If your blackberries are large, these are the perfect size. If they're really big, you can cut them in half. You want to put a couple blackberries on the plate. And then you've got your duck. So it's been resting, probably a few minutes now. It's probably a little bit rare. I can see the juice, but we're going to slice it because we're ready to go here. What's that? Yeah, Justin likes to call this a Scooby snack. So this is the piece on the duck here called the tender, and you don't want to take that off. Go ahead and cook that, and then you get to kind of taste. You know, get a little taste of duck. So I just want to show you really quick because it's starting to get beautifully brown. Before I slice this, I want you all to see this duck leg. The confit that Justin was crisping up in the pan. See how beautiful that skin's getting? So I just flipped that over. So now I've got the duck breast. Now you can slice this. I don't like to slice it too thin or too thick. If it's too thick, it'll be a little bit chewy. So I'm just going to go ahead right at an angle here.
So Trey says you're slicing that, and maybe Jen can pipe in as well. We had some questions regarding, you know, we made the comparison with cooking duck and chicken. Obviously, they're both, you know, fowl, so to speak, or, you know, a bird. But, you know, you have to cook chicken very thoroughly. You can't serve it rare. And then, you know, chicken fat or schmaltz, as one might call it, is not really the same as cooking in its own fat as duck would be also, or, you know, you
can definitely confit. We do that a lot. We take chicken thighs and confit them in fat. Or and it's good. It's delicious, just like duck confit. It's not quite as decadent, but it's a really great way to cook chicken as well.
And what about chicken? I mean, chicken, we're always very afraid of getting sick if we don't cook it all the way through. But duck, it gets a little bit too tough when it's cooked too much. Is that kind of the key, or what?
If it's cooked too much, it gets dry. Right. And you don't want dry. I mean, even dry chicken, right? Nobody likes dry chicken either. So let me set this aside. So yeah, I mean, you know, it's just that it's going to get dry. I think the real main difference between overcooking duck or overcooking chicken is that duck is significantly more expensive than chicken. So here you have this beautiful duck that, you know, you're buying from Liberty Farms. And so if you overcook it, it's I think a bigger loss than if you overcook something like chicken. And then, you know, I just think there's something really special about the fat on duck as well. I mean, chicken, don't get me wrong, chicken skin is great too, but that skin on the top of duck just gets so crispy, and it gets crispy in a much more even way than chicken does, I find. But, you know, here's your dish. Jen, do you have, what are your thoughts?
Yeah, so this is our like kitchen trick. We're changing chicken tricks, kitchen tricks for cooking duck. Someone asked, why can you be eaten rare? Most of the salmonella and problems when you're cooking meat is going to be on the skin itself. It's going to be on the outside and not necessarily on the inside. So it's just really important that you're getting that outside temperature to a certain degree. And I don't know the exact numbers. You guys might have a better answer than I do on that. But for me, when we cook it, if you have your hand like this and you press it right here in the thumb pad, that's rare. And when you press on the meat side and it's that texture, you're good to go. If you open your thumb all the way up and then you press, it's a lot harder. That's well done. And essentially, duck meat itself is actually a very, very lean protein. Like if you took the skin off, don't ever do that. It's really good with
Don't
the skin.
do it. Don't do it.
If you do take the skin off, the meat itself is a hyper lean protein. There's very little fat in it.
Yeah.
Like, there's no marbling or anything like that. So if you overcook it, it just becomes, as Tracey said, like super dry. We do actually sell the skinless duck breasts. And when I cook those at home, I am cooking them low and slow. They shred, so they're really good for like carnitas or pasta sauce or something where you're not so concerned with the presentation, but you can kind of break it up and use it in other elements.
And we use that sometimes. We make a duck sausage.
Yeah.
And we'll use it, but we also add pork into the sausage. So you may not be getting as much fat from the duck, but you're getting fat somewhere else. But yeah, I mean,
you would use that in cassoulet most of the time as well, right?
Yeah, and duck traditionally in cassoulet is duck confit, so it's sausage and duck confit. Yeah.
So knowing when to flip that duck breast, your trick, Jen, with the hand would be indicative of as to tell you when to flip the duck breast when you're cooking it. Is that a safe assumption?
Yeah. So when the skin, if you always want to start with that skin side down, and you kind of want it to be golden brown. You don't want any blackening on it. And of course, if you have some kind of dry rubs or spices, they have sugar in them. So you might get some blackening because of the sugar, but that's a little bit different than actually burning the skin itself. Kind of that low and slow is really important. So you render it down enough that the fat is edible level. If you do it too little, it just ends up being really thick and not fully cooked through. So once you reach that like golden brown color, then flip it over. We will dump off some of the fat when we flip it over, and then turn up the heat just a little bit. So that it kind of sears the bottom just a smidge, and then cooks it all the way. You're going to be cooking the meat from the skin side down. So when you flip it over, you want it to kind of reach that perfect like middle zone.
Exactly. So if you notice when Justin was cooking this, it was on the skin for probably 85% of the cooking time. It was on the skin side. And then he only flipped it over to the meat side for just a few minutes. Like Jen said, it's just getting like, we call it a kiss of the heat, because it cooks so much. And so it's not an even cooking. If you cook them both on both sides the same amount of time, your fat would not be rendered enough, and then it would be quite chewy. And then it would probably end up being overcooked, because when you think about the side with the skin on it, the cooking has to go through the skin before it gets to the meat. The heat needs to get through the skin before the meat, but on the bottom side, that side doesn't have the protection of the skin. So that's why you need less time there too. You're cooking, the heat has to get through the skin to get to the meat. So yeah, that part, and I think that on duck, like we were saying, that skin being crispy is such an important part that it's really important to focus on that part to make sure that that's happening and getting the right crispiness, and that then will, more guarantee you that you are cooking it properly.
Great explanation. Thank you both.
Yeah. Yeah. So here's our finished dish, as everyone can see, great summer meal. Justin's going to hold it up even closer to the camera. Right?
So fast. I mean, like, you guys just did that so quickly. You can do it.
I know. Exactly. And like you said, we did it with showing a demonstration, which obviously takes a little bit longer, and breaking down the duck. If you bought duck breasts on their own and didn't even want to break down the duck, like I said, that's a meal that could happen in less than half an hour easily. And things like I said, the blackberries can be done ahead of time. The eggplant puree can be done ahead of time too. And that's there's always a little bit left over. I probably have a cup left from that eggplant. It's delicious on like toasted bread. If you have tomatoes, you do an open face like with that, with some sliced heirloom tomatoes or dipping vegetables in it. So this has more than a day worth of treats going on. Yeah. And then the blackberries will hold in your fridge as well. So if you pickle those blackberries, they'll hold for about a week in your fridge. So you can eat those with other things as well.
We had a question if you would garnish with the blackberry sauce. And since it's a pickled sauce, I would think that you probably would be a little shy on if you were going to garnish with that.
Yeah, I wouldn't garnish with the blackberry sauce. But you know what that blackberry juice is really good in? It's really good in a drink. So it is. It's great in a drink. So if you want to just add some soda water to it, maybe you have a couple of those mint leaves or those basil leaves laying around. Let's say you were finished with your bottle of wine and you wanted an after dinner cocktail, Tommy here likes some gin cocktails. It would be delicious in a gin cocktail. So it's really, I wouldn't reuse that. Maybe you could reuse it one more time. If this is a dish you love and you make every week, you could probably reuse that liquid to pickle more blackberries one more time. But after that, I would just use it for other purposes.
I've often, a chilled duck salad is something that's been served quite a bit. What would you do with the duck breast? Like what would you just set it out, let it chill down on its own, or any tips about how to handle that? And then maybe a little bit of that preparation on that side?
Yeah. So, I think that you see that especially in a lot of like a Thai chilled duck salad, something like that. If I were eating the duck chilled, I'd probably be aware of slicing it a little bit thinner. Just because the texture does change when it's cold. So, if you see that like what's the papaya salad in Thai restaurants, or that's great with duck. Does that answer your question? Yeah.
Yeah, for sure. And hopefully some others for other people.
Yeah. Yeah. So did anyone else have any questions? I hope there are a couple of people out there that got the whole ducks, or at least inspired now to go out and get a whole duck and see how it's, like I said at the beginning, this is really, duck is not one of those, it's just as easy as chicken. It really is. It's just as easy as chicken to cook. And now you can enjoy it at home. You don't have to wait until you go out to a special dinner to order duck.
One last question that came in. It says, so is this duck to be rare or medium rare? As you're looking at it, what would you call that? Medium rare?
This would be medium rare. And again, this is completely to your own liking. If it's too rare, it can be a bit chewy. If you like your meat cooked a little bit longer, then I would go medium. I wouldn't go past medium, because then that's when you start getting into that dry territory. And again, it will get chewy once it gets dry. So typically duck is cooked about medium rare to really be ideal.
Perfect. The one last question is, when is the next class?
Oh, so we are working on our schedule coming up. So more to be seen. You can find out more information coming soon on the KJ website. We're reworking some things to maybe do some classes. We haven't determined yet for July. So more to come. But yeah, just check the website, and there'll be more classes. And if you guys have anything that in particular that you'd like to see us cook, go ahead and send that information, or you can go and send that request into Diane. And if it's something that we can show in a demonstration, we would happily do that. So we really appreciate all of you that join us. And I know there's been a lot of people that have joined us almost every week. And so we really appreciate that. And we love seeing you all. We're thinking about maybe also rechanging the format a bit, going back to where we can see everyone on the screen. So that way, when we're making something and someone wants to show us what they've made, we have the opportunity to do that. So more to come. Just check out the website, and I promise you there'll be more information. I just want to, here's the finished with that duck leg confit. Justin will hold it up to the camera. But I mean, look at that. It's so, talk about decadent. I mean, that's cooked in its own fat and then crisped in fat. Doesn't get much better than that. It really doesn't.
So good. That's what you could put on top of a salad too. You can shred it up and put it on the salad.
Exactly. Yeah. And then, something that then you could take it even further. Once you have the duck confit in your fridge, you can make duck rillette, which is essentially, it's duck confit that then is mixed with its own fat to make this beautiful, delicious spread.
Well, we did have one other question or comment that was, what about in risotto? Man, that would be pretty rich and decadent, right?
Yeah, but I mean, and then, okay, so you buy the whole duck, you break it down, you take the bones and you roast them and you make a duck stock, right? The same way you would make a chicken stock. Then you use that stock in your risotto with the duck.
Nice.
Next level.
Right on.
Yeah, delicious. So.
All right.
So let me grab my wine. I'd love to cheers everyone. Justin?
And speaking about wines, if you were having that salad, I would say you could do anything from a beautiful Pinot Noir rosé to go with the salads. Mm-hmm. Pinot, Syrah. Cheers, everybody. Cheers.
Cheers.
A variety of Pinot Noirs can go with these wines. Everything from something a little bit more bold from maybe our Monterey areas, or a cool windswept area right down the street from Jen's house with that wine that you guys are having from the Petaluma Wind Gap. Our Russian River Pinots as well, with the big lush texture would go with this. One of my favorite things with duck is also Syrah. A cooler climate Syrah and many different Rhone varietals work incredibly well with duck. Just that lightweight tannin, but darker fruits can really cut through the fat and really pair incredibly well. I see Jen nodding her head enthusiastically as well.
Yes, I also, in France, they pair a lot of duck with aged Bordeaux. So if anyone has any like older Kendall-Jackson Cabernets in their cellars, that would be a great pairing too. If you can hold on to the wine for that long. But I love, we've been lucky to have a couple bottles of the older stuff, and it's amazing.
So we had one other last question before we start to wind down. We're using blackberries. They were asking what other berries. I know cherry and duck are kind of a match made in heaven, and it's a very classical pairing. What other berry or fruit type things would you or could you use in here?
No, I mean, Pedro, you stole my answer already. I mean, cherries and duck are where it's at. They're just one of those things that or two things that go so well together. So definitely cherries and duck. I guess you could do raspberries. They might be a little bit sweet, but blackberries or cherries is where I would stick.
Perfect.
Right?
All right. Well, it looks like we've got pretty much the questions answered. Please stay tuned for more of these. We will have some coming, more coming back up. And if you guys have questions or suggestions or anything you might want to see in particular, please let us know. And we love having Jen along. Thank you so much for showing up.
Yeah,
and
thank you, Jen.
Able to supply some of our fans of wine and turn them on to fans of your duck breasts as well. And Justin, thank you back there, Tracey.
Bye. Cheers.
Cheers,
thank you
everyone.
all so much.
Yeah,
Cheers.
We'll see you next week, and please stay tuned.
Thank you.
Bye.
Cheers.
Bye. Bye.